They're opening a probe. They're probing Alvin Bragg. So in response to Trump being arrested, now the Congress is House Republicans, and we have launched an investigation into Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and his office. So, of course, Bragg and his congressional Democrats they're in an uproar. They're in a tizzy. They are warning that such an investigation could interfere with the ongoing Trump investigation, right? Your investigation is going to interfere with our investigation. Our politically motivated investigation, right? We don't want your politically motivated investigation interfering with our politically motivated investigation. Speaker Kevin McCarthy from California defended their actions by saying in a tweet, he said, Bragg's weaponization of the federal justice process will be held accountable by Congress. Well, Trump's next court appearance isn't until December 4th of this year, so no rush. This is all set up to make sure that it all goes down and happens right as the campaign season is kicking off. You have to excuse me, the pollen is thick here this time of year, so it's playing havoc with my throat. Jim Jordan from Ohio, who is the House Judiciary Committee chair, and Kevin McCarthy are meeting this week to talk about the next steps in their investigation to investigate Alvin Bragg. So when asked about the possibility of subpoenaing Bragg, Jordan said everything is on the table. But, there is a problem with that. Some legal experts are talking about that. The initial request from Jordan and House Administration Committee, they asked Bragg to turn over all the internal communications about the Trump case. So the House Republicans want all of the evidence that Bragg has on Trump. There's got to be some kind of jurisdictional problem with that, right? They're the Congress. They're a federal branch of government. Alvin Bragg is a DA in the state of New York. There's separation of powers, right? But they demanded that Bragg appear and stand tall before the man to answer their questions too. They give their reasons that why they think they can do this. Bragg's office, of course, says that Congress has no jurisdiction in this case because Congress's investigative jurisdiction is limited to federal matters only. Congressional Democrats have sounded off in, what is a now familiar tone with the same argument that Trump and House Republicans have been making all along, saying this investigation represents an astonishing and unprecedented abuse of power as they attempt to use congressional resources to interfere in an ongoing criminal investigation. That's the reason I played those clips for you a minute ago. Clinton, that was 1992. That's 30 years ago, folks. And the other clip there of Pelosi and Trump, that's just, at this point, that's 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even less, maybe 3 years ago, but probably 4 or 5 years ago. This is definitely pre-pandemic. Things are really different now. There's a different feel in the air. House Judiciary Ranking Member, good old Jerry Nadler. Haven't seen him in a while since back in the during the impeachment trials. He said Republicans are trying to, quote, obstruct the process, chalking the request for information up to political stunts. See, Bragg is clearly pulling a political stunt while the Republicans are just trying to play their game, I guess. The three Republican chairmen said the Trump indictment has crossed into, quote, substantial federal interest. So that's why they feel they have jurisdiction to subpoena all the evidence so they can see it. They believe the fact that that the information has to do with a former president, that there's a federal jurisdiction there, that they could justify even putting into place new laws to insulate current and former presidents from such improper state and local prosecutions. Did you catch that? What they're saying is they could put legislation, laws into place so that no president could ever be investigated this way again. I don't know if that's a great idea, but maybe that's been the purpose all along. Of course, legal experts advocating for the anti-Trump cause said the GOP has no authority to launch this investigation into Bragg. One legal expert said the power of Congress to subpoena is not unlimited. It is limited, and it has gotten actually somewhat more limited over the course of the last several years. Why? Because, interestingly enough, it was Trump himself, while in office, his administration launched a case to limit the subpoena power of Congress in order to block House Democrats from getting hold of his tax records. You see what's happening here, folks. It's political badminton. It's just back and forth. In regard to the federal grants, now, Alvin Bragg, like a lot of DAs, receive federal grants to prosecute cases. I didn't know that. Did you know that? That's a fact. And so there's a quote, House Administration Committee Chair Brian Steele from Wisconsin said, in regard to the federal grants the government does give out to district attorneys across the United States, Steele said, progressive district attorneys that are not enforcing the rule of law on their own streets, do we need to rewrite how these grants are being written? The point there is, if that's the case, then it can be shown that Bragg did use federal funds for this purpose. Now, this is legal. This is machinations, and I don't know how all that works. But if Bragg is subpoenaed, I do know this. He has a couple options. If the Republicans do subpoena Alvin Bragg, district attorney who just arraigned Donald Trump, and I guess we'll be trying him sometime next year. If they subpoena him, they call him to stand tall before the man. He has a couple options apart from appearing. He could challenge the subpoena in court, challenge its validity, or he could just ignore it, which would force a contempt of Congress vote. Either way, none of that works out real well for the Republicans. But the House Republicans' broad request for all the evidence represents another legal problem for Bragg to have to deal with as well, who also has an obligation right now to protect the right to a fair trial for Donald Trump. Bragg wrote in his first letter responding to the GOP leaders, he said, these confidentiality provisions, he said, I'm not going to give you this evidence because these provisions exist to protect the interests of various participants in the criminal process, including the defendant. But I wonder if House Democrats asked Alvin Bragg for the evidence, would he be forthcoming? Probably, right? That's how this works. Our nation's divided. And it can't stand for long like this. Some of the information the GOP committees are seeking will be turned over to Trump's attorneys soon. That's known as discovery. When you've been charged and you're going to go to trial, you have to be able to see all the evidence against you. You have to know what they have on you. You have a right to know that. But prosecutors during Trump's arraignment on Tuesday noted concerns about how such information might be used by the former president, as he's been known to do, noting that they're working on an agreement with Trump's attorneys that would block Trump from releasing any of it publicly. Catherine McCaw, a prosecutor on the case, said the prosecutor, the people believe, especially in light of the defendant's public comments, that a protective order is vital to ensure the sanctity of the proceedings, as well as the sanctity of the discovery materials. And they're doing some other things to try to keep things under wraps. That they're trying to make it so that Trump can only look at the evidence against him at the court, right? Adding that the agreement would only allow Trump to review materials in his attorney's office, actually. And he couldn't take anything with him. He'd have to go to his attorney's office. There would be some kind of restriction where the documents, the evidence couldn't leave the attorney's office, and it would bar Trump from sharing any evidence with reporters or on social media. So they're working very hard to keep their evidence from ever being seen by anyone outside